Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the next two speakers. Mario Batali. Mario brought the Italian cuisine and the Italian restaurant into the 21st century. He paved the way for chefs and restaurateurs like Frank and myself. He redefined the class entirely and went on to become one of USA's top restaurateurs and businessmen. One of the best culinary educators and communicators, he continues to inspire us all.
And Danny Bowien, oh, Danny Bowien. Danny, although classically trained, he went on to reinvent and redefine what we all think of as Chinese food is and what heights you could be reached when you take the chance. He continues to be one of the greatest guys in the business and our dear friend. Both of these men have shown us what you can do when you touch people with food and love.
Moderating for us tonight is Gabe Ula, our best amigo.
From Mad Food Symposium, Denmark, Copenhagen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. And a warm welcome for Mario, Danny, and Gabe.
Let's give it up.
Gabe, why didn't you wear shorts? I brought a suit to wear, but I figured.
Yeah, you promised you were going to wear a suit.
I was going to wear a
and
suit,
you showed up
but
like
I didn't wear a
this.
suit. We have to sit.
I don't know.
That looks weird. All right.
Hey guys.
How are you, man?
Good. My understanding is that we can basically talk about anything. So we'll start with the most basic of questions. How and especially why did you guys become chefs? Start with Danny.
I actually grew up, I wanted to be an eye doctor first. I think I wanted to be, then I decided I want to be a musician. I think I kind of...
you were in Oklahoma growing up?
I grew up in Oklahoma, which is very different than... Yeah. But I thought I wanted to be an optometrist. I thought I would go with something that the odds were in favor of. Because when you're young, people are always asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I never thought I would want to be a chef. But I knew I loved food. And it's an honor to be, here with Mario because actually in Oklahoma, my only exposure to food really was watching food shows on television. And Molto Mario, when it came out, for me that was amazing because to me Italian food was like the Olive Garden. I thought that was like real Italian food. And then watching him and learning,
How old were you?
I don't know, probably 13, 12 or 13. And just watching people like him and Emeril and Bobby Flay and all the guys that were on a certain network, you would see that, and that's how I kind of learned. But I don't know, I kind of became a chef by accident, and then because I fell in love with food.
But where did that accident sort of happen, where you just got flung into a kitchen?
Well, my first cooking job was, my first restaurant job was washing dishes at a Vietnamese restaurant because I wanted to get a job. I had a really strong work ethic when I was young, and I always wanted to work. So that was my first job. And then I kind of got to eat for free, and I was a young, growing boy, so I was like, this is a pretty cool job. But not until I was about 19 or 20, when I moved to San Francisco, did I fall in love with food and the idea of becoming a chef.
And you?
My family always thought that food was very interesting, but it was never a sacred Alice Waters, Richard Olney thing. We cooked in our lives because it was what we did as second or third generation immigrants. So cooking was part of my life. My mom wanted me to go to cooking school instead of college, but I had recently seen Animal House, so it wasn't really going to happen that I was going to miss that experience. I'm happy I went to college. If I give advice to any kids who want to become cooks, I tell them, first of all, you're not going to get the TV job. Second of all, go get a college degree first.
It was a liberal arts degree.
Liberal arts degree. Yeah. And then go learn how to cook. And then you'll become a more valuable person, and you'll become a better business person because of that. I was in college studying Spanish theater of the Golden Age, and I worked at a place called Stuff Your Face, which is a pizzeria in New Brunswick, New Jersey, with doubtlessly the hottest waitresses in the entire town, which may have been why or why not I started as a dishwasher there. But eventually I just learned to love the craft and love the teamwork involved in going at something you kind of recognize but don't recognize as a dinner service each night, and either being very successful or moderately successful as a team, and by the end of the night, the ability to celebrate, and also know that you've done good just by looking at the Empty Plate Club. It's a very satisfying thing to do, to give people food or to serve people food. But when they finish it or do a good job with it, it's another way of looking at real success on a daily basis.
At what point does it sort of become clear that it can be a living? That it can be a thing that can support you, that maybe can make you famous?
Well, don't count on the fame story too early. But I mean, when I was becoming a cook in the late 70s, early 80s, cooking was what you did after you got out of the military, before you went to jail. It was not necessarily considered a highfalutin job. Now, with a few TV jobs, of course, it looks interesting and it looks exciting. But the real reason why you should cook and why it will become clear to you when you do it is because you love the generosity of making food and putting it in front of someone and having them eating that. And if you understand that, then you stand a much better chance to be a good business person because you can capitalize on that. But do not, just like if you're playing basketball on your high school team, do not assume you're going to be LeBron James. There's just not that many jobs, so you got to be careful about that.
How about for you? Like, when did you realize that this could be a thing that I could follow for a really long time and just stick with it?
You know, I'm really passionate about music, and I know that you're really passionate about music as well. And I just kind of got to a point where I was playing music in a band, and I was realizing that it's something that I thought I loved, but it wasn't something that I still love it, but it wasn't something that I could just go through, because it's very difficult being in a band, and, you know. But I realized that, you know, I didn't know if I wanted to like kill myself doing that the rest of my life, but I did enjoy food, and I enjoyed like the passion behind it and bringing how it brought people together, and how people, when you think about food, you think about celebrations. I mean, everything really. I mean, you eat at, you know, weddings, funerals. You know, I mean, but it brings people together, and I think that was the kind of a turning point for me. I was like, well, maybe I could do this, because it's really fucking hard. Like cooking food correctly is really, really difficult, and but it is something that, you know, if you do, you know, David Chang says it the best. If it's something that if you do and you do it every day and you really try hard, you'll get better at it. Like, you know, I will never be LeBron James, like, because I'm Asian and small, and but
you can be the LeBron James of Kung Pao pastrami,
exactly,
my friend.
And that's my goal now, is to be LeBron James of
Kung Pao pastrami and mapo tofu.
So yeah, I mean, I think it became a real realization to me is when I found out it's something that I loved, and it took me a long time. I mean, cooking is it's something that you have to give a lot of yourself, and it's a huge sacrifice. But then for some reason I kept doing it. I didn't quit, and I was like, well, you know, 6 years in, I was like, well, I guess, so it took about 6 years of cooking for me to be like, I could do this the rest of my life and be happy.
And I guess, when does it get to the point where you're like, all right, I'm going to do my spin on Chinese food, or I'm going to do mostly Italian food?
Well, you do what you want. First of all, as a cook and as an artist in any field, you have to do what makes you happy first. And if you're happy about that, then finding ways, I mean, keep in mind, doing Italian food our way, we're still relying on 3,000 years of gastronomic cultural history and basically stealing most of our recipes from unbewilling grandmothers all over Italy. That doesn't make us bad people. We're interpreting it, just like he's interpreting Chinese food in a very different way. But what it means is that you don't have to carry that whole weight on your shoulders. When I reinterpret a dish, it's not just because I'm trying to fuck with it, and it's not because I'm trying to improve on something that's already great. My general interpretation involves using local ingredients in dishes that they wouldn't have had those local ingredients. We don't import all our ingredients from Parma or from Puglia or from anywhere. We import a few things from Italy, but what we want to represent is the smell of the wind as it blows through the orchards on Thursday afternoon. And if we can capture that by shopping at the farmer's market and still use Italian ingredients, the inspiration is already written.
That brings me to a question that I wanted to ask about authenticity. Do you think it exists? Does it matter? I mean, you just opened a Mexican restaurant.
Yeah, I opened a Mexican restaurant in New York, and Mexican food is really fucking hard to make. Like, you guys, if anybody wants to come work in New York and show me how to make Mexican food. Now,
he starts at $62 an hour with no taxes
whatever
taken
you
out.
want.
He's unbelievable, boss.
It's, you know, again, like Mario was saying, it's like finding something that you love and that makes you happy. And I think that as a cook and as a chef, and in the restaurant world, it's a sacrifice. But it's like you do crazy things for things that you love. You know what I mean?
But, I mean, why is it hard? Why is Mexican food hard? And when you sort of make a kung pao pastrami, or you do your spin on Mexican food.
Well,
do you care if
especially-
someone thinks it's an abomination or if it goes against tradition?
Yeah, it's hard for me because like in my heart of hearts, all I'm trying to do is learn more about the food. I'm not Chinese, and I'm not Mexican, and you know but these are foods that I love, and when I taste those foods, they connect to me on a very emotional level, and it's like, man, I love this. I really want to learn how to make this, and then do it my way. But it's really difficult because you're right. Like there's a lot of Italian food. There's like so much literature. A lot of the Chinese books I find are only in like Chinese, and I don't read Chinese, and so it's really difficult to embrace some of these cuisines that are really unfamiliar to me. And then not saying Italian food is super.
Well, I don't think that Danny Bowien is necessarily worried about authenticity. There's no reason for you to pretend that you're making Oaxaca taco or whatever dish it is. What you're looking for is something that represents your take, like on a song. And in the same sense, authenticity is not reproduction. There's an authentic feel to his food because he understands the nature of heat transfer. And there's a very authentic feel because of our techniques that we use in our restaurants. But you won't find these dishes being reproduced on either side, whether it's from the Italians coming this way or our food being reproduced by them. Because reproduction is not authenticity. Authenticity has to have a base in the soul and in the heart. And it's about how you perceive yourself and how your customers perceive you. It's not about somebody in the journalist world trying to decide whether you're authentic or not. Because at the end of the day, who the fuck cares? Is it delicious? Is there value? And do I like going there? If that comes down to it, that's the experience I'm trying to sell you. Journalists love authenticity.
But I think that
But it's a debate happening right now because you have guys like Andy Ricker sort of
Right.
cooking cuisines that they weren't born into, and some people are somehow resistant.
Well,
to
you didn't
that,
grow up in
which
Italy,
which
right?
boggles my mind. But
I grew up in Washington State.
Right. So it's like I think it's just choosing something that you really
Lo
love.
Stato di Washington.
Choosing something you love and like insanely immersing yourself in that, and then you become like, I can ask Mario a question about like probably anything Italian, and I know that he'll have an answer. Like asking Andy Ricker something about Thai food, like I know he'll have an answer. He'll have an idea of what I'm talking about. I'm so new in the game, like I really don't know anything. So it's like, but it's fun because I'm at such an organically starter level. That with Chinese food now, like I feel like we know our shit when it comes to Chinese food. But Mexican food is very, very difficult because I'm still familiarizing myself with flavors and techniques. And it's like when the Italian food, like sometimes you're making a sauce and like all of a sudden one day it clicks. You're like, I don't need to follow this recipe. I need to make a sofrito. Then I need to make when it looks like this, I add this and this and this. It takes a long time to get good.
But
at
are you
that.
suggesting that you're following recipes in your new Mexican restaurant?
No, if there was a recipe book that I could follow,
Right.
I mean,
you're going with your gut. You're not trying to reproduce Quintana or any number of great Mexican chefs. You're not trying to reproduce their dishes, are you? Or are you?
No, definitely not trying to reproduce anyone's dishes, but just trying to make it something that tasted as good as like, the chicharrón de queso I had in Mexico City, or like as good as like, I don't know. There's so many amazing foods. It's just like, it's so new to me. It's like I never had Korean food until I was 19, until I moved to San Francisco from Oklahoma.
Just last year.
Yeah, last year. So yeah, it's just something that's so new to me, and then, but yeah, you embrace it, and then you educate yourself, and then you become like this man right here,
When are you reopening Mission Chinese?
That's a good. I don't know. Like, so we have two restaurants. One is in San Francisco. One's in New York. The one in New York has been closed for 6 months, and I want to open tomorrow if I could.
It's going to be hard from here, buddy.
Yeah, I can't do it from here. I want to open a restaurant in Mexico City. I would love to do that, but
Yay!
because a spicy Chinese restaurant in Mexico City would be. My partners are like, what is he talking about? No, Mexico City is badass. This is a city that really inspires me, and that's why we chose to make Mexican food. I was like, I came here, I had one trip here. I was like, that's it. Like I have to like learn about this food and make it. But
you just binged on Mexican food for a couple of days, right?
Yeah, I ate at 35 taquerias in 4 days. I've been here twice, and then I had to go on a diet after that. But like, but back to the Mission Chinese story. Hopefully, Mission Chinese will be open by the end of the year. That would be my sincere hope.
Another thing about Mission Chinese is sort of, got named the best new restaurant in New York. no tablecloths. You can go pay 20 bucks for dinner. And it sort of brings me to the question of like what diners want or what chefs want to do. I mean, does it mean that like Michelin-starred restaurants matter anymore, or tablecloths?
I think they definitely matter.
Or is there room for everything?
Well, if you look at the recent economic diversity issues, if the 1% are the only ones left that want to eat at the fancy restaurants, you would probably do better to serve the 99% on the other side. That said, fine dining is no longer so much about the accoutrements of the tabletop and the luxurious settings.
It's about the food.
It's about the food and the wine and the pairing and the smarts of the staff. So fine dining isn't going away. It's just some of the silly tabletop stuff that really eats into the profit of a restaurant is going to slowly slide away as we realize it's not as significant as investment as we thought initially. So maybe you don't need tablecloths, but you certainly need a table. Maybe you don't need fancy silverware, but you still need knives and forks and chopsticks. Like, you need to figure out what's important to your guest. If you're going to invest your time and money, though, you might want to think about making sure that your kitchen is well staffed, that your food is well purchased, and that you're really paying attention to both the health and happiness of your staff and the satisfaction of your customers. That's what will buy you longevity.
And you?
He answers it so we did this the other day we did a panel somewhere else in New York, and it's so hard to follow Mario because he really nails it on the head every single time, when it comes to things like that. I mean, talking about longevity of staff, I think that is one of the most important things, is treating the people that you work with. We were having a conversation about this earlier, but treating the people that you work with so much respect, because they really are the people that help you achieve your vision. Like his gelato lady, I keep calling
Meredith Kurtzman,
has been at one of his restaurants for 15 years.
14 years.
14 years. That makes the sickest gelato. But it's like, how do you establish those relationships? And then it is like a family. And
we also have to keep managing her. Like, we send her to a gelato school in Sicily or some special stage somewhere every year. You have to invest in the people to make sure that they're feeling challenged intellectually as well as capable of doing kind of what they want. And when you're thinking about designing that menu, whether you're doing it for yourself or for somebody else, first please yourself. And then she does that all the time, and that's what makes her happy.
I mean, have you gotten to that point where you have to worry about keeping staff?
It's a funny situation because the first restaurant we opened is in San Francisco, and we kind of went inside of another restaurant, a Chinese restaurant, and it was kind of failing. It wasn't doing too well. And we were like, hey, can we come in here and just use a part of your kitchen? And then they let us do that, and we made our own menus, and that took off and became something bigger, and then we just started making Chinese food and hired their staff. So their staff there has been there for 4 years. They're not going to go anywhere. It's a great job. In New York, it's a little bit different. It's harder because, you have great chefs that are opening restaurants all the time. And as a cook, you're young, and I think this is some of the best advice anyone ever gave me as a young cook, was that you really need to put your time in and stay somewhere for longer than 6 months to a year, because by the time you're there for a year, you're just really learning. If you're doing it right, you're just learning, that chefs, the techniques that you want to learn, and to just jump around and go to lots of different places, your skill set isn't really fully developed. And so, but in New York, it's hard as a cook because you want to be able to go cook with Mario, and you want to be able to go cook with Daniel Boulud, or go hang out with the Franks, and it's accessible because we all need cooks badly. I don't know about you have
everyone needs cooks.
Yeah, need cooks. So I think that's very important. I've had a little bit of an issue. My core team, my chefs Angela and Zach, that run Mission Cantina, Mission Chinese. We've been together for 3 years now. So hopefully that's 14 years and more, your gelato lady. But I think it's crazy because it's like family. It's you're meeting new family members and bringing them into your circle.
A question for you. I mean, how do you create a family when you've got so many restaurants?
Well, we didn't decide to open new restaurants for the simple manifest destiny of taking up more market space. Each restaurant was opened as a result of someone in an old restaurant, like a sous chef or a wine director or a assistant somm or an assistant manager, reaching the top of the glass box that they were living in at that restaurant. And as opposed to allowing them to go work for Danny Bowien or David Chang or Danny Meyer, we tell them, listen, you're doing a great job. We'd love to open a restaurant with you. Can you scratch together some capital and put it together and be a part of it as an equity investor, just on the same terms that we go in? And that's how, at this point, I have 24 executive chef partners, 23 general manager partners, and we're always operating on that level. So that family percolates down because they know that they're treating their family, their staff, like the extended family. I may not be in every restaurant every minute, but as Alain Ducasse says, I'm in every restaurant every day.
But one thing that strikes me is that there are people that still come in to dinner at a Babbo or B&B in Las Vegas, and they probably still hope that you're there.
Sure. They stand a really good chance. I'm always there, every day. No, but I'm like in New York City when I'm not working in a restaurant kitchen, I'm in the restaurant anyway, and I'm wandering around.
Yeah.
Only thing I don't have to do anymore is clean up, which is a great thing.
Right.
But I'm still in the restaurant kitchens all the time, and whether I'm actually sautéing the ramps that are going to go in your spaghetti or actually putting the cheese on it and bringing it to the table, I'm just involved. And that's because that's what I like to do. If I didn't like it, I'd stop. I mean,
Yeah, you can seriously like walk into Otto or something like that and see Mario in the back bar with a Diet Coke and like doing work on his iPhone. It's insane.
That's where you
It's
do all the
crazy.
interviews.
Exactly. That's the office. My office is near the kitchen, always.
I was particularly excited to do this because we have sort of the mega success who's sort of been around for a while. And we have the guy who just won the Rising Star Chef Award. And I just wanted to ask you sort of what mistakes Danny should make.
Please
and what
tell me.
mistakes
Can
he shouldn't
you
make.
shoot me a very long email that says
I would
how
say-
I became Mario Batali, and then because I want to, it's insane.
What should he fuck up and what should he not?
The trick about being a good leader as well as a good cook is you can't be afraid of mistakes. The moment you walk away from a mistake, that's when a failure happens. If something goes awry and it doesn't work out like you want, that's how life happens. You get back on the horse, you go back into the dish, you figure it out, and if the same thing happens where there's a breakdown in how you train someone to make that dish, you do it this way until they get it right. And it's the constant reinforcement. It used to be that chefs would yell, beat, scream, and some of them still do on TV, but it's just not my jam. But basically the way to get people to do the best work is to show them how you want it and always stay with it. As long as you do that, there are no other real mistakes.
But what have been sort of the most instructive mess ups that you've made?
I think that if we had any mess up, it was that we weren't paying enough attention to our staff as we were paying attention to our customer satisfaction. What you really need to do is spend half the time working on your customer satisfaction and half the time working on your staff satisfaction. And if there's a misinterpretation between either of those, that's when things get a little bit rolling off the wheel.
When did you realize that?
I realize it every day. No, you know what? When we first started our human resources department about 4 or 5 years ago at Babbo, that was the message. The message was make sure people know that they're on my team and that I'm on their team. And it's being able to share that responsibility, but also that pleasure and also that joy of being somewhat in the limelight, but also being recognized by your peers as doing the badass job. And if everyone can understand that they're doing a badass job and being loved by their coworkers, then they're going to stay longer than they would. They will flit. Butterflies will flit from Bowien to Chang to Batali. Iron chefs learn the task at hand and do it for another year before they move on to another task.
Anything you want to specifically ask Mario?
I don't know. It's crazy because I feel like I was like groveling earlier, like growing up watching Mario. I feel like we've gotten to know each other since I moved to New York, and I ask him lots of questions. Most of them are about like kids because I just had a kid. But it's insane to have this wealth of knowledge like next to you and like. But I feel like I ask you, honestly, every time I see you, I ask you like 4 questions. And
it works.
It's like, why did I fuck this up? Like, how do I fix this? What is the answer to this? But yeah, I don't know. I just feel super lucky to be a part of all of this. Like, it was surreal. Actually, I had a moment with my wife 2 days ago. And I was in my hotel room, and I was just like, this is fucking insane. To me, this is insane because, like, as a cook, 5 years ago, I shit you not, 5 years ago, if I were to meet you or like any other chefs, because at this point I've gotten to be lucky enough to meet chefs like Enrique Olivera, like that was outside of, I never even thought that would happen. And then within the world of food, it's kind of so tight, and that's a good thing. You can actually meet your heroes, and you can like do things with your heroes, and you can like it's just ridiculous. It's like it's a crazy thing, and I think that if you never give up, like you were saying, my restaurant got closed in New York. I'm not crying about it. We're gonna open a better restaurant. You know what I mean? And it's like that mentality of just always like pushing and pushing. Well, you can get to hang out with Mario Batali on stage at Mesamérica. You can do whatever the fuck you want as long as you don't ever give up, and that's something that's to me and that's insane.
I have one question for you, Gabe. In the onslaught and constant opening of new web spaces, blogs, media opportunities, symposiums, how do you propose to keep it fresh, other than by merely trying to convince the cooks and restaurateurs to do things. As a journalist, what is your hardest task?
Not being inspired by traffic bait. Doing what you think is interesting. Talking to the people that you think are interesting. And not worrying if 3 people read it or 5,000 or 1 million read it. That's the way I see it.
It's amazing how the Zen goes from that side to this side at the exact same flow. If you do it for your heart first, you will be successful.
Eventually, maybe a bunch of people will read it. Maybe not. But now, to bring it back to the fame question, how does it affect your work, and what do you do with it? You know, we were in New York at Mad Monday, and you talked a bit about that, and I want to sort of revisit that question.
Fame is an unusual prism. It's an opportunity to use the soapbox to magnify your well-thought ideology or your lack of thought in ideology, and it will carefully take it apart, or at least explore it to its very base. Fame based on just a couple of years of experience generally falls apart very quickly. So search for your fame slowly, build it carefully, and maintain it as best you can. It takes 20 years to build a great brand. It takes 3 nasty drunk days to totally fuck it up.
And that's especially pertinent, I think, for Danny, who's becoming more and more visible. You put a burrito on your menu, and then they're like 200 people outside your restaurant doing it. I mean, how does that make you feel?
Well, I just know not to drink for 3 days in a row and fuck it all up. No, it's crazy. You know, to me, it's like, things come at you so quickly. You know what I mean? Like, especially, things just whiz by. And I'm sure it's like, it was like this for you when you started. Just like, next thing you know, you've got a television show, and then you've got like a couple of restaurants and a lot more. And then you have restaurants here and there, and then you have Italy, and it's just insane, right? So it's like, I think just really taking the time to like take it all in. And then I'm at the point now where it's like, it's crazy. It's like, I don't know what, you know, you have to like handle it maturely. Like, there's a lot of insane stuff that comes along with it. But ultimately, I think it's awesome because it's like great for your brand. You know, it does take a long ass time to build a brand properly and correctly. And, you know, it's just, I don't know. It's crazy. Like, I don't think that I'm famous. I think that if anything, I would love for our brand, for Mission Chinese Food and Mission Cantina to be famous forever and for people to love it. But that's a good question because I don't really know anything about it. Everything is so new to me and like crazy. So.
And this is my second to last question, but it's tied to the fame one, which is the question of chefs getting out of the kitchen, advocating for things, speaking at symposia, stuff like that, being at places like this, forums like this. A lot of people think it's bullshit. What do you think?
I mean, I don't think it's bullshit. I think that's one of my, you know, if you want to talk about my personal like things, you know, Mission Chinese Food opened in New York like a couple of years ago. We got best restaurant in New York, and I spent a lot of my time that first year. A lot of things came my way, and they were like, "Oh, do you want to go here, 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 and here?" And I think that I really wore myself really thin, like in the sake of being at a lot of symposia and like a lot of like food events and like food and wine here and there and there. And actually David Chang set me down and was like, look man, it's like as an older brother to you, I want to tell you, you need to be in your restaurant. So for someone like me, I need to be in the fucking restaurant because I need to make sure that my restaurant is good because it's so young. It's like 6 months old, you know, 8 months old. For someone like Mario, he has the best chefs, some of the best chefs. Mark Ladner and Brooks Headley are some of the best chefs in New York, if not in the world, man. And those guys hold it down, and he has the ability, the team, you know, to be able to like just kill it. And I think building a very strong infrastructure is very important for me. So I don't think that they're bullshit. I think that they're amazing, and I got to meet my heroes at like, you know, the Mad Food Symposium. I got to meet my heroes here at Mesamérica. Like it's a cool thing as a cook to be able to go and partake in. As a chef, you got to make sure that you're ready to leave your restaurant for a lot. I think that was a mistake I made in the beginning.
How about you?
I think it's important if you go to a symposium or you go to one of these events that you carefully consider what you want to say. Just being there is a luxury, but there's a lot of people who aren't prepared when they get there, and they don't really do themselves a favor. It's still fun, it's enjoyable, but if you can't say what your message is about your entire discussion during a recipe or during a symposium like this in one paragraph or less, you should really reconsider what you're thinking about and what you're saying, because you're going to be measured on it. And you want to be precise, and you want to be smart, you want to be effusive, you want to be well-spoken, but a little bit less is always a little bit more. So think about what you're going to say when you get in front of the public. Even though it's a privilege to be in front of them, it isn't a right, so make sure you're careful.
And then the final thing, on a cheesy but sincere note, all the people up there are students. What are the what are the little pearls of wisdom that you would leave them with? We'll start with Danny, and then we'll finish with Mario.
As a young cook, as a cook, I think, you just have to make sure, especially nowadays with Instagram and Twitter and the immediate availability of, and the access of food and food knowledge, I think you need to go find a chef. It's very important to find a chef that you can trust and that you want to learn from, and stay at their restaurant for a while. Don't go work there for 3 months. Yeah, it takes 2 years. Do that, because no one does that anymore. And if they do, those are the people that are going to become great chefs. Don't get caught up in all of the other stuff. It's hard. Before, you used to have to, if you wanted to go see what a chef's food looked like, you used to have to buy their cookbook or go to their restaurant to eat. And that was so much fun, because you didn't know, it was a surprise. Now people are taking pictures on Instagram and putting the newest dish from this tasting menu. You already know, you're already desensitized. So I think if you really want to make something special for yourself and of yourself, you need to take the time, and you really need to take the time and invest it in with a chef or a restaurant or something that you really believe in. It doesn't even have to be a chef in a restaurant. Just an idea with food that you believe in, and incubate that for a while. Don't jump around, take time, and then don't give up, and because it's a labor of love, and don't do it if you want to be famous, because you just spoke about that, and it's do it because you love it.
I'm with him. I would say there's a couple of ways to look at the first is the work at hand. Identify who you're working with, who is the one that you emulate the most, and follow their behavior. Show up early, stay a little late, clean everyone's station, including your own, and make sure when you walk out of the restaurants, it's left in perfect condition. Then you look at the base of the craft. When you stay at a restaurant for 6 months, you will definitely learn their tricks. But if you stay there for a year and a half, you will know the craft. And the craft is what will take you much further than knowing how to play one lead guitar solo. You need to know all about the music. You need to know all about the ingredients. You need to know all about the purchasing. You should really know how much bleach costs and how much it costs to repair a chair. Because if you really want to run a restaurant, the way to understand it is to own every single detail of the entire experience, from the front door to the lights over the bar, to how much liquor costs, to how much it costs to transform veal shanks into ossobuco. And if you pay attention and learn from someone who's really going to do it, you're going to learn really well. If you just take away a couple of glistening little tops and then move on to the next restaurant thinking you picked it up, you have left a lot of money on the table. So get everything you can out of it and ask more questions and really try to understand the purchasing and the butchering of this stuff. Because the sauté is the glory work. But at the end of the day, what makes a restaurant great is the entire package experience. And knowing how to manage the kitchen is just half of it. Then you got to figure out the front of the house.
It's very true.
Danny Bowien, Mario Batali.